Good evening and welcome to Kunsang Payo Choling. We're happy to be here tonight and to be here with you tonight. So it's a great evening. Our teaching tonight by Jetsunma and Lhamo was given in 1998, and it was a weekend retreat. And so it's in 3 parts, and this is part 1. So the others will be following on Sunday and then Wednesday again. So this is part 1. The title of the retreat was Guide Your Life with Right Thought, and it was given in November of 1998. So we begin now.
What I would like to explore a little bit today is right thought. And in order to explore that, let me explain something to you. The Buddha has given us some fundamental teachings. These fundamental teachings are all pervasive. They affect every element of the path from the beginning until one completes the practice and accomplishes the practice. So these fundamental teachings are important, and they help us to understand how absolutely essential it is for us to practice contemplation throughout the course of our Dharma career, if you will, or our Dharma experience. So I'd like to just in a general way offer you those fundamental thoughts and then look at their connection to right thought. First of all, the Buddha pointed out the faults of cyclic existence. Those of you that have been here for a long time should be quite familiar with that, even familiar ad nauseum, because that's the point of learning teachings like that. They are meant to turn our minds, they are meant to reform our habitual tendencies, and so our responsibility becomes to contemplate these thoughts throughout all of our exposure to Dharma. So the Buddha taught us, first of all, that cyclic existence is pervaded with suffering and with fault. And the Buddha described this all-pervasive suffering as being something that we cannot avoid. So long as we are involved in samsaric life, involved in samsaric existence, there is no way to avoid creating suffering or creating the causes for suffering. A small diversion, we can understand it this way. The Buddha teaches us that in order to increase happiness and to avoid suffering, we should avoid killing. Actually, unless we ourselves stop living, we really cannot avoid killing. Of course, we make every conscious effort and we try as hard as we can, and we never have the intention of killing anything. We never try to squash a bug or kill a person or do anything like that once we've taken these teachings. However, if we brush our teeth in the morning, and I sincerely hope we do, if we brush and floss and do all those nice things, put on deodorant, we actually are killing sentient beings, because there are living microscopic beings that are in the same in a relationship with us that is constant. We can't get rid of them. They are part of us. We have bacteria and single-celled life forms that I am not enough of a scientist to know anything about, but I know they're in there. And so we find that we can't avoid killing. The same thing happens when we walk outside. We look down, we try not to step on any bugs, but the moment we walk on grasses or not level terrain or natural terrain, at that time we are already squashing some bugs. They may be very tiny, and perhaps in our minds they are less significant than us, but the Buddha has taught us that this is not so. And so we have this constant dilemma and this constant need to contemplate in order to remain mindful how it can be that while we are here in samsara, we are admonished not to kill, that killing will cause great suffering for us and for others. Yet we seem to be unable to escape killing. And so this is something that needs to be pointed out and something that we need to remain mindful of all the time, so that to the best of our ability we can avoid any killing or any harming of others. And also so that the Buddha's teachings about samsara can be driven home. Sometimes we try to make it too simplistic and too easy in our minds. It's like after we have our initial exploration of why we should turn our mind toward the path, after that point we kind of play the tape over and over by rote. We don't really explore each and every time, and yet the Buddha has taught us it is valuable and important and potentizing for our practice if we were to maintain a certain level of contemplation continually. So here we are, learning that we should not kill, we must not kill, and yet we cannot seem to avoid it. And so what that teaches us about samsara is also what the Buddha has taught us, and that is that samsara is by its very nature flawed and faulted. Because everything in samsara, everything about samsara is, here's a very contemporary Western word, neurotic. It's quite true. It's actually quite true. A textbook definition of neuroses is not to act inappropriately in relationship to our surroundings and what factors are actually occurring inside and outside in our environment. So it's like we act inappropriately regarding our response to stimuli. That's neuroses. That's how we live. Because in our involvement in samsara, all of samsara, every portion of it, including our measurement of samsara, our actual perception of samsara or of our environment, let alone our response to samsara, is based on a false idea, is based on what Buddhists call non-recognition. Non-recognition meaning the inability to recognize and to awaken to abide naturally in one's own primordial wisdom nature, which is our true nature, which is the Buddha nature. This is the truth of us. This is the nature that naturally is our fundamental contrivance-free primordial wisdom nature. This is the truth of us. And yet, since we are in a state of non-recognition, we act exactly the opposite. all of our actions, everything that we do, go to gratify the five senses. As though we have literally no understanding that everything our five senses can perceive is impermanent, and it's nothing. It's not a bank to put your money in, if you can allow a materialistic analogy. It's not where we should put our emphasis. It's not where we should put our confidence. There is nothing in samsara that warrants our confidence. Everything is changing. The only thing that we know about samsara, according to the Buddhist teachings, is that it's flawed. It is based on incorrect supposition, incorrect idea and conceptualization. It is based on the non-recognition of our nature, and the only characteristics we as human beings can count on in samsara are old age, sickness, and death. Of course, that's if we get to old age. Sickness and death could get us first. So this is what the Buddha has taught, and our responsibility lies in constantly correcting our view, constantly correcting our perception, and what we choose to accept and what we choose to reject. This is what the Buddha has instructed, that we should understand that while we are revolving in samsara, we cannot help but create the causes for more suffering. And we are taught as well that while we are revolving in samsara, unless we have the kind of mind training that we are participating in now, we have no idea of cause and effect relationships. We have literally no idea what brings about suffering. We are in a constant play or dance or interaction with our own five senses. Our five senses tell us, now I'm too hot, now I'm too cold, now I'm too empty, now I'm too full, this feels rough, this feels soft. And so we're constantly in this balancing act, or this movement, trying to get to the full as opposed to the empty, and the soft as opposed to the rough, and the comfortable as opposed to the cold or hot. And we're constantly in this dance. And it's hard for us as practitioners to actually understand how much of our energy, how much of our concentration, how much of our emphasis goes on creating this comfort in our environment. It's obvious, perhaps on some levels, we can see that we are trying to create comfort, trying to create of well-being and so forth. But it's less obvious and more difficult to spot that we are constantly engaged in also psychological dancing and manipulating, if you will, in order to gratify our five senses as well. Because we are judging our environment according to the way it affects us. And again, this is a neurotic way to approach our world. This is a neurotic way to approach anything, because in truth, there is no duality. There is no separation between self and other, between inner and outer. Yet we are constantly evaluating our environment, and because of the idea of believing in self-nature as inherently real, and then formulating, which we have, these senses that constantly verify this idea that phenomena is inherently real, and therefore perpetuating the neuroses, While we are constantly doing that, at the same time, we are reacting to what we perceive to be external out there. So not only are we perceiving something outwardly happening to us, assuming the separation, but we are reacting toward or against it, reacting with hope and fear, always using these five senses as sort of like little traps to grab onto our environment and hold it still long enough to perpetuate the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. We call this survival. And it's as neurotic as anything you can possibly imagine. The whole thing from the get-go is completely and utterly neurotic. Based on false ideas, reacting to delusion, and then the next step is that it causes us to build superstructures of ego based on this bounce-back phenomena that we're constantly getting. And then even in the superstructure of ego, we are constantly again trying to gratify ourselves. For instance, okay, I've decided that I'm here and you're there. And now, that being the case, how do I feel about that? Well, I don't like sitting in the box very much. You guys are way far away, which is, that's okay, that's comfortable. You guys stay right there. No, it's all right. I'll stay in the box. I'm just being naughty. So basically, the next thing that I would do is I perceive in this way is I would begin to react. I would begin to react, and based on that reaction, I would compose a structure of some sort. Like, for instance, if I were ignorant and stupid, which I probably am, but if I were ignorant and stupid, I would say, gee, I am in the high box. I am higher than you. Therefore, I have a sense of power. Boy, do I like this job. Now, none of you have ever heard me say that, right? So maybe I'm not as ignorant and stupid as I could be. So, based on that kind of conclusion, or that kind of reaction rather, we build sort of a superstructure, which is like an internal idea that is hidden. And all of it is geared toward creating some sort of temporary gratification based on the idea of self-nature that really doesn't exist, the separation of external phenomena that really does not have self-nature. Based on all these wrong ideas, I continue to form a veritable novel of even more ideas, and we call that our lives. Check out what's happening in the White House, a novel. So we call this our lives. And yet the Buddha has taught us that samsara is filled with suffering, that while we are in samsara, we cannot stop creating the causes for more suffering. And for most people with no mind training, they haven't a clue as to what causes result in more suffering. So it's like 50-50. We just keep gambling, keep throwing those dice. And we come back with whatever we come back with. So that's true of people with no mind training. And the Buddha has taught us that these beings, therefore, are filled with suffering, with no hope that they can untangle the mess. No one told them that self-nature is not inherently real. No one told them there was anything else to even look at or think about or try to ascertain other than the absolute solid concrete reality of the five senses and all the information, diluted or not, that they feed to us. Most beings have never heard any different than that. 99.99999% have never heard any different than that. So the choices they make are all across the board based on some kind of temporary gratification. And let's get past the psychological buzzwords. Whether it's immediate gratification or eventual gratification, it's still samsaric gratification. It's still based on these false assumptions. So everything that people who have had no mind training do is based on this completely diluted process. So it's as though, if you could imagine a line right down the middle here, and I have a bunch of stones I'm going to throw, and those stones represent whatever energy I put out based on whatever it is that I perceive. I would just be like blindly throwing these stones, and some of them would land on the happiness producing side, and some of them would land on the unhappiness producing side, and I would literally have no control over that because my eyes are closed. So you can use that analogy as a way to understand the difference between someone with mind training who has the opportunity to use contemplation and someone who is simply going with what ordinary view they have been taught. One has some control. It's like a ship with a rudder, and the other one is completely rudderless. There's no way to steer. Even though these sentient beings could be very well-meaning and could be working very hard at their lives, there's simply no way to steer. Again, because we are in our delusion and in our non-recognition, constantly making inappropriate choices, neurotic choices. So, if sentient beings are not able, due to their reliance on the five senses and due to their assumption of the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, how does their insight differ with the Buddha's wisdom? And why does it differ? Well, that's a big enough question where we don't have time to answer it. However, I think it's a good enough question where it bears looking at least in a small way. And it's an important enough question where it behooves us to contemplate on this a great deal. When we make decisions, we make them on the basis of our own experience. Now for us, again, I've explained to you how the five senses can reflect to us a very biased, very diluted kind of experience. But even if it were possible to have a purer view, and even if somehow we could magically break through that delusion, we still only have enough life experience, as much life experience rather, as we are old. Now for some of us that are getting long in the tooth, it may seem, and I especially feel that, especially since that was mentioned to me the other night. Several people have told me that. So, Now that we're getting long in the tooth, we think, oh, we've attained some degree of venerable, you know. I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm 70, I'm venerable. So by that time, we're thinking we've learned enough to where, you know, we're experienced. We have a certain wisdom that comes with age. And it can be seen. We can see that by the time we reach these middle ages or later ages, we have more to work with, more experience to work with. We can offer a tremendous amount of insight to younger people. I mean, that's true. We actually can offer tremendous insight to younger people. And so we think that we've attained some kind of clarity or some sort of venerable perspective. Actually, in truth, it is the same neurotic assumptions that are based on assuming the permanence of those things that are impermanent. It is the same assumptions that are based on the idea of self-nature being inherently real, which is wrong. It's exactly the same thing, except that while before, when you were younger, you were doing that little neurotic samsaric thing with about 20 years of experience. Now you're doing that neurotic samsaric thing with about 50 years of experience. Wow. So some of our habitual tendencies have gotten even more deeply ingrained. Really, nothing has changed. We're just better at it. Now, in the Buddha's view, however, now, of course, we understand that the Buddha does not perceive in the same way, utilizing the five senses based on the idea that self-nature is inherently real, based on everything else being separate and all these ideas of division and delusion and conceptualization and so forth. The Buddha relies on wisdom. Now, wisdom actually consists of the awareness of the fundamental primordial Buddha nature. We are not asleep to that nature. As the Buddha experiences, its experience is based on simply self-luminosity. Its experience is based on suchness, without contrivance, as it is, with no beginning and no cessation, but fundamentally complete in every way. The Buddha perceives the unity of emptiness and fullness, the non-duality of self and other, the luminosity and omnipresence of the primordial wisdom nature, which is our nature. Couple that with extraordinary knowledge that is not only based on, not based on a false assumption, and not based on a short length of time, whether it's 20 years or 50 years. The knowledge that the Buddha has is based on the Buddha's ability to see beyond samsara. The Buddha does not recognize samsara in the same way, but is in a state of wakefulness regarding the primordial Buddha nature. So the Buddha is aware of all causes and effects, all causes and effects, you see? Not just the ones that began 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, or even 100 years ago. It was said that the Buddha could, upon seeing any student approaching, knew every single turn, every single step that it took to get to that present moment where they met with the Buddha. And they say that the Buddha's awareness was also such that time, which has meaning to samsaric beings, has no time to the Buddha. Has no meaning to the Buddha. There's no basis for time. There's nothing to mark in time. If we are in a state of recognition of the primordial wisdom nature, there is no thing moving through something else that marks time. So there is no recognition of time in the same way. So that same student could come up to the Buddha, and the Buddha would not only know every step that the student took to get there, but would also see every probability, every projection from that point forward, and would see it in such a way that it was all now. It simply is. We, on the other hand, are struggling with, now let's see, what do I do next? No, what I do get here, I did it, one step in front of the other. And that's how, that's kind of how we function. So the Buddha tells us that because of that, functioning in that way, samsara is pervaded with suffering. In that once we assume self-nature to be inherently real, and we are in a state of reaction toward other, which we suppose to be inherently real also, and inherently separate, we are constantly trying to solve the problem of having these senses that are constantly perceiving and trying to make ourselves comfortable and permanent and safe and secure and loved and beautiful and healthy and all these things. And we want to make sure that we only feel good stuff and taste good stuff and see good stuff, and we're constantly involved with this, and so we are constantly caught up in the realm of desire. We are constantly in the grasp of desire. Because the minute that you sense something not in accordance with your particular neurotic, crazy idea of what's permanent right now, we got to quick get it. We got to own it. We got to have it. We got to be it. Get it now, so that we can continue to maintain this state, which in our delusion we think is some kind of natural rhythm of relative comfort and safety that we call our continuum, which unfortunately doesn't really exist at all. Or fortunately, actually, you'll find out. So, after all this amazing and disturbing news, does the Buddha just say, too bad for you guys, you're all deluded, you'll never figure this out, adios amigo? No, that is not what happened, thank goodness. And unfortunately, a lot of people that study Buddhism feel that Buddhism has like this not very positive image, because we're thinking about impermanence and death and old age and sickness and suffering, and so shouldn't we just be positive? Help yourself. Okay by me? Will it prevent old age, sickness, and death? No. Will it transform one's perception into the Buddha wisdom? No. Will it even, in a small way, short-circuit the neurotic playback thing? Not at all. In fact, it sort of increases it, because when you are constantly trying to keep positive, because if you don't, things are just going to explode. If you're quick, think positive. So if you're thinking positive in order to make everything safe and hold still, if you're thinking like that, of course, the mind becomes more and more brittle, more and more neurotic. I mean, you're flat out crazy by that time. We're like way beyond neurotic by that time. Flat out crazy. And there's no real result, because the mind has become tighter, more convinced of self-nature being inherently real, more convinced of the separation between self and other. I got to control this. I got to think positive. You know, that kind of idea. The mind becomes only more fragile, more brittle, more neurotic, less able to be awake to the primordial nature, more convinced. And so we continually engage in activities that bring about some kind of relief in a temporary way, not understanding that as often as not, we abandon the potential for some eventual good result by going for some sort of temporary gain based on lying to ourselves and pretending that we don't understand that everything is impermanent. So literally, we put all of our energy into impermanence, not contemplating it, not learning about it, just participating. So we put all of our energy in that. Now, the Buddha has taught that even though all of this is true, we should have like the Hallelujah chorus right now. Wrong religion, I know, but it would be cute, don't you think? Well, anyway, now the Buddha gives us the good news, and the good news is there is an end to suffering. That end to suffering is enlightenment. Or Buddhahood. And then the Buddha proceeds to give us the method. Everything that passed after that was the method. Now, earlier on in the Buddha's teachings, he spoke about the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path was one of those grocery lists that you and I love so much. It's something like, I don't remember all the 8 of them, but it's like right action, right meditation, right occupation, right thought, that sort of thing. And each one is a particular study as to how to live one's life. Now, we on the Vajrayana path have not changed the Eightfold Path. The essence is completely preserved, but it's expressed differently in a more kind of abstract conceptualization. And that broader way, and I think even more profound way, is to understand that one must accumulate wisdom and knowledge. That this is the method to bring about realization, to accumulate wisdom and knowledge. So this is great. We're told that we're locked up in all this delusion and we're really head over heels out of luck. And yet we're told that samsara is faulted, and we're given all of this information that really kind of points things out to us. And then we're told there is an end to suffering, and we are given the method. Now, while we adhere to the understanding that to accumulate both wisdom and knowledge, and I will explain the difference between the two and how they relate to one another. But first of all, while we do sort of conceptualize the Eightfold Path in that way, let's backtrack a little bit and look at right thought as one of the components that brings about realization and the relief of suffering. Now, there are many ways to understand right thought, and of course the most easy to understand, the most simplistic way, is to understand that virtuous thoughts produce virtuous results. Virtuous thoughts produce happy results or good results, positive results. So that if we think about the thoughts that the Buddha has given us to turn our minds, if we think about the condition of samsara, if we think about the condition of sentient beings, if we think about the difference between what is virtue and to be taken up, and what is non-virtue and to be discarded, if we think about these things, this is a method. This is an actual method that the Buddha taught. The Buddha advised that this is one of the 8 main methods that we should constantly engage in. Now, one of the mistakes that we make as Vajrayana practitioners when we engage in this more abstract understanding of accumulating wisdom and knowledge is that sometimes we kind of miss that. We kind of think, oh, I better get me some more wisdom. I better get me some more knowledge, and I'll collect some more of that, and I'll learn how to play all those instruments and do all those things, and then I'll get some wisdom. I'll read some more books, and I'll be able to quote them too. And we sort of feel that we are more in a collecting mode than anything else. If we were to backtrack a little bit and understand that underneath this accumulation of wisdom and knowledge is still the Eightfold Path, and particularly this one aspect of it, which is right thought, is extremely important. And the Buddha indicated that this is practice that we should engage in all our lives. That right thought is one of the necessary components. You cannot have the ultimate result of realization with the exclusion of one of the necessary components. Now, this right thought, of course, like I've said, can be understood as being virtuous thought, dharma-oriented thought, thought that increases our practice, thought that makes us understand the flaws of cyclic existence and therefore turns our minds ever more securely towards the practice of dharma. Of course, we can think this must be right thought, and we may think that the thing to do here is just to think dharma thoughts all the time. But let's look at right thought a little bit more deeply, shall we? Let's look at it based on what the Buddha has taught us about our own senses, about samsara, and so forth. Right thinking or right thought on the path requires a certain amount of depth of understanding, contemplation, and combing through ideas and concepts in order to maintain this right thought. And that is this. how has the Buddha laid out and described our experience? Now, here we have to refer to the teachings that we have been given. The Buddha teaches us that we have existed in the delusion of self-nature being inherently real since beginningless time. Beginningless time means unimaginable time. Time so stretched out that our finite minds cannot compute. Just can't get it. And so we either understand a good long finite time or forever. And whatever good long finite time we can imagine, the Buddha says we have supposed the nature of self-identity to be real much longer than that. But the Buddha does not teach the idea of forever. So we are given this happy compromise, beginningless time. Don't you think that's cute? I like that. There are these cute little jelly beans in Buddhism that you just kind of pick up every now and then. Tasty little things. So the Buddha gives us this idea of beginningless time. Since beginningless time, we have established and re-established and habituated the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, and therefore the assumption of the separation between self and other. This has been going on since beginningless time. So during this time, since beginningless time, we have engaged in habit making and habituated ourselves repeatedly again, to the point where now every decision we make, every idea that we have, every reaction we have, every activity that we engage in is based on the information that the five senses feed us. And there is no moment, no longer any moment, or even a fraction of a moment, where you can say, shall I perceive this from the point of view of Buddhahood and the primordial wisdom nature? Shall I understand the non-conceptual truth of all that is? Or shall I see like a human? You never get that choice anymore, right? Even if you trace every impulse back, every thought back to its root, if you had that capacity, you would see that the thought of self-nature being inherently real and the reaction come up simultaneously. There's no moment. There's no space in the mind. So, while the Buddha has taught us that we have habituated ourselves into the idea of self-nature being inherently real, into the idea of individuation, since time out of mind, and since that beginningless time, we have created karmic cause and effects. Because the moment self-nature is seen as inherently real, there is reaction. Reaction creates cause and effect. Karma has been playing and resulting and causing and resulting and going on and on and on since beginningless time, to where we now have no knowledge of what our karma actually is, other than what's actually developing now. I mean, to some degree, and the Buddha has said this, we can kind of see what we were like in the past. We can kind of see what some of our karma might be. We can look in the mirror. It's simple, but it works. It's much better than going to your corner psychic. Just look in the mirror. So you look in the mirror, and you find that you're a fairly reasonably happy person. Well, you must have given comfort or happiness or some sort of relief to others in the past. Or let's say you look in the mirror and you find out you're a very lonely person. You must in the past have held back your friendship, have not brought comfort and kindness and friendship to others. Let's say you're very beautiful. You look in the mirror and you're very beautiful. So probably you have kept vows with your physical body. Maybe you've worn robes in the past. Maybe you have kept the Vajra vows and practiced purely using one's body. Conversely, maybe you look in the mirror and you're not so beautiful. And so looking in the mirror and seeing not so beautiful, or maybe even downright not beautiful at all, depending on what time of the day it is, then you look in the mirror and you see that, and you can understand that probably the covenant between one's nature and the expression of that nature, the body, have been broken somehow. That there has not been a clean samaya kept with the body, or a clean commitment kept with the body. Downfall concerning the use of the body. Now that relates also to health as well. If we have fundamentally good health, we can think that in the past we must have contributed to the well-being of others. And if we have fundamentally bad health and we're always in trouble, then maybe in the past we brought some kind of non-virtue into someone else's life that created their lack of vitality or something like that. So in a way we can look in the mirror. The Buddha has taught that we can look in the mirror and we can see the probable causes that have brought us to where we are today. But what we can't see through any mirror, and we have to simply take on faith from the Buddha's teaching, because the Buddha has that perspective, is that we can only see this minuscule projection or result of causes we have created in the past. Because only some of them are ripening now. I mean, in any time and space grid, there is only room, if you will, for so much to ripen. If all your karma ripened at one time, you would like explode or implode or both somehow. There's just not enough room for all of it to happen at once. So we see only a bit of it. But the Buddha teaches us that at any moment we have these karmic packages, bubbles, if you will, that are constantly coming closer and closer to the surface of our mind streams, where our perception takes place. These are constantly ripening and coming forward, and you won't get to experience all of them in one lifetime. Lucky you. And we are taught that also these ripening bubbles of karma that are coming forward, resulting from causes that we have engaged in since time out of mind, beginningless time. And there's like gazillions of them. Like, is there a bigger thing than gazillions? No? Anyway, there's gazillions of them. That these ripenings are controlled or affected to a huge extent by the catalysts that we are creating in our lives right now. Let me explain. Let's say we have no mindfulness about right thought. And let's say we just let our minds do whatever whatever they want to. I'm sure none of you have ever done that. Let's say our minds are just kind of like uncontrolled and just doing exactly whatever they want to. Gelatinous old minds just gelatinizing around. So, and let's say, oh, excuse me, ordained, if this is a little bit too risque for you, just close your pink little ears. Let's say we look up on a billboard, and it's one of those car things, you know, they're selling a car and they happen to have a lady practically naked next to it, which has a lot to do with motors, doesn't it? I mean, you know, let's say you look up at one of those billboards and you see the car and the lady in the bikini. And let's say you're a healthy man. Defending. And let's say you look at the billboard and suddenly you start thinking, car, girl. Oh, the things one could do with car and girl. And your mind sort of goes off on a tangent and you get into one of those afternoon delight kind of thoughts, you know what I mean? And it's sort of like snowballs. It gets bigger and bigger. The thought gets more and more potent, more and more powerful. They do that, don't they, if you let them go? You ever notice that? In fact, sometimes we think, gee, this is fun, I'm going to encourage it. Car, girl, car, girl, car, girl. Wow, this is really cool. So we let our minds just go completely haywire. Now, let's say we have all these karmic potentials that are ripening since time out of mind. Let's say those potentials that are close to ripening are fairly benign. They're fairly okay. There's not the karma that's ripening right now. It may be mixed karma in that there is some virtuous and some non-virtuous karma in it. Obviously, there's some non-virtuous karma. You wouldn't be thinking like that. But anyway, let's say it's fairly mixed and you're not having too hard of a time. You're kind of able to maintain. But let's say because you have this lovely day of car and girl, and let's say car and girl continue until that night and the next day, and they affect your activities and your dates and your everything, you know. You know. So let's say that there is some kind of big effect here. Now what happens here is that the mind stream is being affected or is being filled with a certain kind of perceptual scenario that has a vibration quality. I'm trying to explain this from a metaphysical point of view so that we can get an idea as to how this works. But it has a kind of vibrational attunement, if you will. I know I've spent too much time in Sedona, but it's a word and it works. So it has this kind of vibrational quality. Okay? So it will naturally attract and magnetize your own karmic bubbles ripening and coming forward that have like vibration. So like vibration is going to start moving fast to the forefront. So here we're doing car and girl, right? So let's say in the past we have all kinds of, whoa, we got some sick stuff back there. Whoa, it's getting real nasty back there. Let's say we have some elements of sexuality and relationship and that are just not wholesome. We're talking not wholesome at all, okay? However you want to think of as wholesome, I don't know, but let's say it's coming forward and suddenly something happens. And you know, you saw this billboard and then you had this amazing day that kind of was pretty interesting. And then that night, oh, you and your girlfriend, you had this amazing night that was even more interesting. And then from that point on, you have attracted some kind of karmic bubble that is coming forward that will change your life from that point forward. But we can't see this. All we see is a billboard. And the temporary feeling, the immediate feeling of gratification that we have when we react to that and get some kind of, I don't know, excitement bubbling up or whatever. That temporary feeling of oochie coochie, whatever, excitement, is to us seemingly a pleasant feeling. But we are so ignorant, we're like blind, we've got blinders on, we have no idea that we've just changed our lives. By looking at this billboard, by allowing our minds to run in that way, we have brought to us circumstances where if we had the ability to look out and choose what we wanted, we definitely wouldn't have brought that forward. We definitely wouldn't have gotten that one forward. That would not have been a conscious choice. Because associated with this now ripening karmic seed is terrible unhappiness, terrible suffering. Perhaps based on the changes that are brought to our mind stream from that point forward, perhaps we change our lives and perhaps it's subtle at first, but we move away from some kind of pure, virtuous life or a generous life into a life of seduction and, you know, silk sheets and stuff, something, whatever, cars and girls and things. So, and let's say in that our minds change, and now we can't come back because we don't feel the same way anymore. Our minds change. We're different now. There's a hardness to us. Because once you get off the path of virtue and start really wallowing in non-virtue, you got to close down shop. You can't be feeling things. You can't be looking at things. You can't be truthful. You have to close down shop. You have to find other neurotic things to do that will take up your time. Because you can't think and you can't feel. So now your life has really changed. And let's say associated with this past karma, this old past ripening seed that is now coming forward, let's say you caused through your really like gross and non-virtuous egocentric sexuality and relationship issues, let's say that you harmed others, that others were, well, maybe used by you or harmed by you, or that there was just this terrible selfishness associated with it. So let's say as this karma ripens and comes forward, now we find that we have some kind of social disease, some kind of sexually transmitted disease. Where did that come from? Did it come? In our ordinary state, we think it came from the outside environment. Such and so gave it to me. No, such and so didn't give it to you. You gave it to you. If you didn't have the seed for that, you couldn't have gotten it. So it's like that. The event that we think is a result of our environment is actually an event of our minds being out of control, ripening this karma that we ourselves have given rise to, and pulling it forward. So here comes the Buddha's teaching then about right thought. Now I'm using this silly example. I mean, I'm using a billboard and a girl in a bikini and a car. You need to understand that this kind of thing happens in not so obvious, silly, and overt ways, but happens really in much more subtle ways. Much more subtle ways that moment by moment we engineer unconsciously and change the direction of our lives because we do not practice right thought. Right thought should always lead to recognition. Right thought is that development of mental capability, is that accumulation of the necessary habit patterns in order to bring about the state of recognition.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And the parts 2 and 3 of this will be now Sunday and the following Wednesday. So I hope you tune in again for the rest of this workshop. And I hope that it's beneficial. We do show these teachings. I say this every day, every week. We do show these Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. and Sundays at 11 a.m. on YouTube, and they're recorded, so they are also available on YouTube, so you can watch them there at any time. And we hope that you do, and that you enjoy them. They were all given, here at KPC and over a number of years, and so they reflect, how many things have changed and how many things have not, which is kind of interesting. Excuse me. In addition, we also have meditation classes Saturdays and Sunday mornings at 10 a.m., both on YouTube and in person. The temple is open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, and you're welcome to come in. We do request that you wear a mask, but come on in, and do whatever, whatever prayers and whatever you like doing. If there's a puja going on, you are welcome to join, or do your own practice, whatever is more comfortable for you. So just know you're invited, and we're happy to have you. Medicine Buddha, we offer a short, condensed practice of Medicine Buddha that particularly targets people who, are sick, or know people who are sick, or have lost friends or family. And it's a short, like a 15-minute practice in English primarily, that Jetsunma created for, the time of COVID and all of the diseases that have sprung up since then. So come and make use of it every evening at 7 p.m. on Facebook. It's a time to, put in your prayer requests and do something for all these people who are suffering. Also, we offer a soap practice, which is a food offering ceremony every day. Monday through Friday evening is in the evening times, different times, and the weekends are around noon on Saturday to at Sunday. And the venues change. Usually they're on Zoom every day. Sunday, if it's outside, it'll be on Facebook. So, we'll just see what the weather is. In any case, those practices involve gathering tons and tons of merit, which is great. So all of these, we welcome you. We hope that you come to the temple, enjoy all the activity that's going on. If you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, you can always do that to her PayPal account, which is jetsumagift@gmail.com. That's in the chat. And also check out KPC's Buddhist Relief. It's kpcbuddhistrelief.org, and you can it's grown so much over the last, not even a whole year, maybe the last 5 or 6 months. It's been incredible. So at this point, so much food is being distributed, primarily here in Montgomery County, and to those who are food insecure, of which there are many, many, many more than we ever imagined. So we're doing our best to help alleviate some of the pain and suffering of that. And you can join in and help if you like. There's lots of ways to do that. Go check out that website and find out. And if you forget all these names and things, our main website is tara.org, and you can find all of this on tara.org, including the calendar, which will help you find all of those events at different times here. And you just go on tara.org, scroll to the bottom of that front page. You will find something that says webcast and calendar. Click on that. Below the webcast is the calendar. And you just click on the calendar, look and see what event you want to attend, click on that, and it will open up to show you the links that you need to get into it, and links for the practice that we're doing. So you will be all set, and you can feel comfortable joining in, which we hope you do. So thanks again, and we always appreciate your donations here to tara.org. Just check out the website and see if you find things that are interesting. We'd love to have you volunteer. We'd love to have you just come and visit. Come and visit the animals. Just come and visit the statues and the meditation gardens and the prayer room, which is, a pretty wonderful place to pray and meditate. So we invite you to all of this, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful week.